Hi everyone, I've got my cup of tea and my trusty mug. Loads to talk about today. Um, I suppose this reset, this lockdown, this circuit break, all these terms, this terminology is more for a thing, a structure, which is maybe how the left-wing communist order view us, as everything being a social structure, as they're trying to train everyone to think, these days, from school to every institution. So we're being talked about as in terms of structure now. We should just consider ourselves that. We call ourselves sort of, I don't know, names like sort of Microsoft names, maybe, just like we're programs to be switched off and reconnected, shut down, rebooted, whatever. So this is all how it is now. But I always did wonder how the worlds colliding were going to get along, let's say, or be managed. And I think it was pretty obvious that it was going to be with more control from artificial intelligence, censorship, monitoring, facial recognition, things like that, more tech to control us. Because the two worlds clashing was one of where we were supposed to have a sort of a flourish of identity, be what you want to be, trans, gay, all the rest of it. And the Muslim world also, which was growing larger and larger every decade or so. These two worlds were going to sort of clash in some way eventually if technology couldn't master us, couldn't control us beforehand. And with the masks and the retraining, I think we can see how these two worlds are going to be imbibed together now. This very liberal world and this fast approaching, more controlled, maybe more Muslim leaning world, more technocratic world of the Great Reset, the third technological revolution. No, the fourth, because it fits in with the fourth empire of Daniel, the final empire, which is unlike any other, which controls everything in its path. It said, when you think of other empires, Roman, etc., they only stretched so far for so long. But the trouble with having the whole world in its hands, would mean that there was no real release of freedom, no real insurgence possible. So, well, hopefully the bubble will burst eventually, but we don't know how long we're going to live under this kind of martial law. So, yeah, these two worlds colliding, I think it seems clear how these could be managed now, this very liberal world and this growing Muslim world. And they talked about multiculturalism having failed. So it was quite clear to me that this was just, blagging. And they were doing it really and covering the tracks where you're putting it in plain sight, that there was another agenda on the plans, which was a monoculture. And this monoculture is being, created now through the use of masks, and the fact that we were made to think that our identity meant so much we could play with it, when in fact it really meant nothing, because our integral identity was being replaced and denatured. So really all the time it was working on the integral identity, the soul, the embodiment, to make us like sort of headless chickens, to make us like a shell, I always explain it as, that doesn't feel quite at ease with its inner and its outer matching, something that can be transed, maybe put a bit of varnish and gloss on here. So this is the worship of the image. It makes more sense if you read my book and look at some of my videos, and you'll see how these things cross over, the worship of the image, the transing, the devaluing of integral identity, ready for this stage now where we're all masked and where we were lied to. I knew it was obvious we were being given beads, for our real integral identity. We were saying, you can be this, you can be that, take these beads, exchange it. And this means you can have a great big colourful carnival, which you can be anything you want to be. Well, we know not everyone can be anything they want to be. We know it's a farce, it's a charade. They're giving us beads, and it's quite clear now they're quite happy to take those beads away and make us wear masks. And it isn't just the masks, it's what it represents. It represents this: we are all one. We are all of lesser value, no value, because we can't differentiate between each other, even in a sort of masquerade sense anymore. So yeah, the shell, the mask, the transing, the war against the seed, the dehusking of the shell. The war against the seed is written in Revelations 12:17. It talks about persecution of childbirth, and then it talks about a place in the wilderness. And this is in contrast to the prostitution of Babylon, the nations of Babylon, where a free-for-all, anyone, open to everyone, all comers, is what we are expected to be within Britain, within London, Babylon the Great these days. So we have this contrast of the woman in the wilderness clothed in the sun and the persecution of her seed. And as I say, this resembles the transing, this resembles the denaturing of everything. But obviously the nature aspect represents a more integral quality. And the earth swallowed a flood, and the flood has been talked about in many terms of flood of a flood of change, really, but also a flood of immigrants and a flood of change of what is integral and what that actually means. People have been putting these things together as the same way I have. It's pretty clear, really, when you read it. The 12 stars being cast to the earth, like the 12 stars of the European Union, Europa and the Beast. These are very significant things to, the Skull and Bones and the Bohemian Grove and the people who are running the show, like the Bilderbergs, and they've got their big meeting coming up, haven't they? I think is it in the spring? I can't remember where it is now. What's it? Something TOS. What is it called? I forget what its name. TOS being a correct word for it, really. I can't be bothered to get my names right. I'll go with the flow. There are things happening here now that are just so peculiar in terms. I wanted to focus on the way they're dehumanizing with the language, as in circuits, the New World Order, treating us like a social construct, but also the fact that the social construct is very much ingrained in the conservative ideology these days, the modern conservatives. We could see that there was a lot of, I would say foul play, really, when they were going for the Labour Party being anti-Semitic. Because it was posturing, and there were various groups saying they would leave the country if a certain government came into power. They're really playing identity groups here and creating and generating fear, where I don't think it was particularly valid, although these questions will become more and more valid as the sort of demographic changes, because we'll be a country more and more influenced by, say, Islamic ideology and how that affects Jewish people. And of course, nobody really mentions all the many Rotherhams, do they? We don't even get given the reports. Is it any wonder, with all this hoo-ha going on, that they can't be bothered or, interested in that sort of grassroots people? Because, as I was saying, the Conservative Party these days is very different. It doesn't believe in conserving the nation in the same way. It doesn't have the same heartstrings. It doesn't have the same pulls on the heartstrings. We could see that by what was going on. I mean, Welby was saying, Justin Welby, listen to the rabbi, don't vote for Labour, basically. That was what he was saying. But these people say a lot of things these days. I mean, Welby's very much caught up in not reporting child abuse. They don't have the right heartstrings. They don't have the right connections to the things that they should. They've become a please everybody type of thing, which fits into this very modern Darwinistic attitude amongst the Conservative Party, which I've seen, which is anybody can be somebody within their little happy realm, but they don't really think that human experience is very important. It's just meaning that you stayed on the tracks, you've got the right paperwork, you fit it in, you've kept your nose clean. This is why reputation is so important, because the types of people who have got into power, that's how they think. They don't think as in being part of bringing up their children to be part of a run free in the wild, find your pre-existing bonds amongst the people around you, but to rule and to own culture, and to keep yourself safe from people who might bring you down, or basically hothouse their project children in a way that separates them from really feeling the grassroots of anything very much, so that this cycle repeats, and that identity politics becomes very segmented, and the feeling of it goes. You don't get people with the right sort of heartstrings, the blood pumping, when they hear about the reality of some of the very horrible things that are going on that they should be speaking about, and the slants things are taking, and just the political slants because of the way these people have been brought up, and then they're trained at school to think a certain way. So the Conservative Party is very much now about image, keeping up appearance. It doesn't conserve in the traditional Scruton sense a feeling of noblesse oblige and care towards the nation, as it would. It's very segmented off, you know, and image bound. So it's more to do with people who are like bloodsuckers, feel like they can get on better by being within power, by following these codes of conduct, rather than rocking the boat in any way. They're all too well trained, you know, cotton wool experience mummies or daddy's boys, really. And then the ones who go to private schools can be very traumatized by their own experience, and then they just sort of become completely numb to anything that isn't basic. You know, we've got here, we deserve to get here, we're tough, we switch off certain parts of our emotions, that's it. You know, the lived experience was something that I found the Frank Furedi gang really disliked, because, you know, they were very happy with their sitting on top of the pile with their lived experience. They could play things with their own mantra, and, you know, they're very anti people who are victims of child abuse, or very anti people who use their identity to try and get somewhere. They like Manira Munra because she's an example of anyone can be someone. The real life story, well, that's just not meaningful, because, you know, who's got time to listen to that? And I found this a lot with conservative people, keeping up appearances. The real experience meant nothing. It's just the song sheet. It's just getting along with each other, flattering each other for advantage, that meant most, fitting in. And these are the type of robots we've got running the show these days, because anybody with lived experience is kind of scary to them. You know, if you had seen the face of power abuse, you know, damaged people are dangerous. They know they can survive. And these people playing on fears, playing with manipulation these days towards us, you know, I mean, it's just bizarre. They're sort of like the horse of the New World Order, aren't they? They're being used by it. Similarly to how Harry's being used by Meghan, you know. All the fears and all the anxieties are very far removed from real fears and real anxieties, and they're very much based on what you can get out of life, not real woes and real suffering. They don't really understand the nature of what it's like to go to every single institution and be turned away. You know, we used to call it the medical mafia when my friends and I, some of us, were abused. You know, we knew that there was a medical mafia, mental health, GPs, etc. This is becoming, to those of us who know, very, very obvious with all the abuse cover-ups. There's always been a doctor involved. There's always doctors involved who've either meddled with notes, protected people, you know, satanic ritual abuse. They medicated people, and this is something that they say didn't exist because it doesn't fit into the hierarchical kind of scheme of things either. The type of people who don't want it to exist. Because they're happy in their little nests, they don't want to be dislodged. It's all about just getting on. It's all about having the right paperwork and not having any real lived experience. You know, real lived experience is what creates great art. Real lived experience is what creates great thinkers. And all the people that we have in positions of power have just slid along through now with this processing. And this is why, one of the reasons why we're in such a state. The type of modern conservatism that we have just doesn't have its finger on the pulse. It's a bizarre situation, and, you know, the type of people that I've grown to really dislike and distrust in terms of character generally. So I've been waffling on a bit there. Yeah, there's a floods of people. Okay, and I've experienced it myself when I was trying to be housed. There was a short piece in the paper, a tiny little paragraph saying there's been a huge number of people just come in, and that meant I couldn't be housed where I was promised to be housed. I was put somewhere very much more unsuitable for my needs at the time. They tried to get me to move to a different county, even Luton. They wanted me out of the area, and I had no family support. I was quite vulnerable. This has real life-changing consequences, the way that these establishments work. The type of people who are just yes men who run the show, as I said, you know, hot housed, you know, just sort of parents' projects, not really been out in the world, understanding the reality other than tick box, get the certificate, get your papers, and then you're made, and anybody challenges you, you know, that's the biggest sin of all, isn't it? Anybody rocks the boat, that can sort of unnerve other people about how they got to where they are, or whether they'll be next, or makes people feel uneasy. So this is the kind of conservatism that we have nowadays. It's very shallow and sort of superficial. Okay, I'm going to probably leave it there quite soon. Thank you for watching me. If you've got anything else to say. Right, I've just had coffee so far. I must get something more to eat. So yeah, I'd like to do more of these. I haven't done any for a while. I've had a full house here and lots going on. But yes, the New World Order, the reset, it's very, very worrying indeed. Just take a look at my book for sort of more of a reaffirmation of what I'm saying here. It's much more easy to see the technicalities of what's going on. I will leave it there for now. Good luck to you all out there, truth seekers. Bye.